Hey, what is up, everybody? Platform Disciple here. I've got 3 new cards from the upcoming Revelation set to spoil for you today, but before we jump into that, I want to give a friendly reminder that the Kickstarter for that set is still running. So if you haven't checked it out already, there will be a link to that in the description of the video. For those of you who have already supported and pledged to the Kickstarter, thank you for supporting the game. This game is truly an indie developed game, so your money that you spend on this game does make a real difference. It's not a gigantic corporation that your transaction doesn't make any difference. It's really going into making the health of the game better, so it does count. And for those of you who are still on the fence, I did want to say that this is really the best value you're going to get out of a digital trading card game, that the bang for your buck here is just much higher, that they really want to get participation in the game, and because of that, the deals at every tier in the Kickstarter are really excellent. And if you can't support the game financially, but you are queuing up for games and you're putting in the hours, you are supporting the community that way. So either way, thank you. And before we begin, I also wanted to mention that there are some spoilers coming from other sources, and I'm not able to keep up with the spoilers as fast as they're coming out, so I'm going to redirect you to the Lightmare Studios channel, because they recently posted a gameplay video between Jason and Agent Coil that featured some of the new cards that were really cool. Notably, I was very excited to see Agent Coil playing a Swarmer deck, because the Swarmers are a character type slash faction, or it's a category of deck that's existed for a while, but has kind of underperformed, and it's really cool to see that they're getting some new cards that are going to help bring them to a more viable state. And with that, we can actually jump into the actual cards that we're going to look at today. I have got 3 of them, and it's a common and 2 rares. So we'll start with the common, and it's Incite. It is a 3-cost, 1 Purity Flamed On ability card, and it says target character on the battlefield permanently can't block. And it also has recall for 5, so you can play this card 1 time from your graveyard at the cost of 5. And I think that it's reasonable to make the comparison to Exhaust, which is in the same faction for Flamed On, is the same cost and has a shared function in terms of being able to neutralize a blocker. However, the differences between the cards are Exhaust offers the versatility to be able to target a blocker or attacker. So if you need to go on the defensive, you can use Exhaust to protect yourself. But on the other side of things, Incite, making a character be able to unable to block permanently, takes care of that character forever. That if there's a really problematic blocker that you can't get through, like if we're thinking of maybe the Descendants of the Dragons, the Avatars, those cards are really tricky for Flamed On to deal with over the course of the game, and being able to make sure that you can attack straight through them is very nice. And there's also that recall component, that you can play this card a second time from your graveyard. So because Flamed On is such an aggressive faction, most of the time, if you're 2 Purity or 3 Purity into Flamed On, you're really the player who's driving the course of the game, and you're the player who's going to be in the assault zone more often. Because of that, compared to Exhaust, this card, Incite, caters into your core game plan a little better. That I think that this card may really outclass Exhaust in most cases for Flamed On. That Exhaust does have its utility there, but I think Incite, if you're really planning on being the proactive player, helps you to continue to be proactive through some of the more problematic blockers. And then the recall effect is kind of just gravy. That I don't know how powerful it is to play this card again at 5, but you have that option available, and having more options is always really powerful. So anyways, yeah, that card seems pretty good. Let's move on to the next one, because the rares are a little more interesting. Next one is Vasir's Dreadknight, and it is a 5-cost single Purity Exiles card. It is a demon, and it's got 14 attack and 8 health. And when it deals combat damage to a character while attacking, the excess damage will be dealt to the next defender. This is an effect that we've seen before, and it's proven to be very good at dealing with small blockers. That it makes it so your character, which is considerably larger, doesn't get just walled by a bunch of little weenies. And that's nice and all, but it plays in very interestingly with Vasir's Dreadknight's next ability, which is that when it kills a character, you create a copy of that character in your hand and permanently reduce its cost by 1. So, Vasir's Dreadknight kind of has a card draw ability in it. And it lets you draw cards that ordinarily might not be available to you because you're stealing them from your opponent. And because of that first ability, it might draw you 2 cards, because if your opponent has lined up multiple characters in the defense zone, Vasir's Dreadknight has the potential to kill more than one of them. And that might give you the ability to draw 2 discounted cards. So this, to me, reads like a very strong value piece, that Vasir's Dreadknight, even in its scenario where it doesn't really hang out on the battlefield too long because it gets killed, if it trades with your opponent's 5-drop, like your 5-drop, which is Vasir's Dreadknight, trades with theirs, then you get that card from your opponent and it's discounted by 1, so you can spit it back out. I think it seems great. I can imagine using it in the command zone to try to drop him right in the assault zone as soon as possible. I could imagine using him in the deck. And because draft is coming out sometime later this year, I think it's worth mentioning that this seems like an absolute boss in draft, that the amount of value that this card has the potential to produce, like the ceiling is very high, and the floor is pretty high too, that your worst case scenario tends to be that he just gives you 1 extra card and kills a blocker. Seems great. All right, moving on. We'll talk about our final card here, which is Crestmoor. And before we kind of jump into this, I should preface this by saying Crestmoor, the card, is based off of Crestmoor, the person. And I don't know the full background, but Crestmoor is the head of Yoto One, which is a company that has partnered with Lightmare Studios that makes Infinity Wars. And to kind of just sum it up as quickly as possible, as somebody who doesn't really know all the details, Crestmoor the person has played a very significant role in making Infinity Wars a playable game today. So Crestmoor, kudos to you if you're watching this video, and it's really cool to see you get your own card and that the card is as cool as it is. So let's jump into the details. He's 6 cost, he's 2 Descents to the Dragon's Purity, he's a unique character, human, he's a 12/8, which is not great for his cost. However, he's got 2 lives, and 2 lives has proven to be a very, very powerful effect on any card that it appears on, because it helps protect you from removal. It can allow the character to block twice favorably. It can attack through a board wipe. The 2 lives kind of lets you carry buffs more effectively, because you can almost double dip on those buffs, because, well, anyways, two lives is very good, is what I'm getting at. The next effect on the card is Crestmoor deals morale damage instead of fortress damage, which is interesting because I recently talked about Spirit of the Serpent as being a card that has kind of the same effect, but underperforms because its stats just aren't there. Crestmoor breaks that mold, and we'll get into that in a sec, because Crestmoor's final ability is that Crestmoor has Deadly while in the assault zone. And the combination of all 3 of these abilities basically means that if Crestmoor's in the assault zone, he's either going to hit your opponent for 12 morale damage a turn, which is a lot. It's really something that you can't afford to let happen. Or he is going to be blocked by small characters, which is fine because he can potentially keep attacking over and over, and he's going to burn through your opponent's morale because they're blocking, because he's killing characters. Or your opponent's going to have to block with a larger character to try to trade with Crestmoor, but he has Deadly and 2 lives. So Crestmoor can kill 2 characters that are significantly larger than him, before he dies. And because he is in a faction combination, the double Descendants of the Dragons period, that cares about morale burn, being able to pressure your opponent's fortress, or pressure your opponent's morale, while also being difficult to block, because if they block him, the characters die and they lose morale that way, makes him maybe the most aggressive Descendants of the Dragons card we've seen to fit under that morale burn category, because traditionally Descendants of the Dragons does morale burn in kind of like a controlling way, whereas Crestmoor is really proactive. And because of that, I think we might get to see some new types of Descendants of the Dragons decks, and the fact that it leaves that last Purity open as a flex slot, you can potentially combine him with some other factions to have Crestmoor carry some significant buffs so that he can pressure for even greater morale than he already does. I think he's a really cool card. I can definitely imagine him being in the command zone, being kind of like the central focus of the deck. But even if you don't make him the central focus of the deck, he supports the already kind of existing strategy of burning morale for Descendants of the Dragons. Super cool. Anyways, that's all the cards we've got for today. So hopefully if you guys enjoyed them, just let me know in the comments what you think, what kind of decks you might use them in. And until next time, take it easy.